Right, well, I'm planning on fitting the inverter and the Turbo GX and maybe another solar charge controller under the bench seat at the side. We've got the existing leisure battery under the driver's seat, which is swivel seat. We've got the EBL, the Electra block, and the existing booster, as they call it, the WA121545, is under the passenger seat. And the engine battery, of course, is up the front under a panel. So first thing I'm going to have to do is create some space, and I'll start that by taking the table out and moving that out of the way. And then we'll look at taking the seats out. In principle, taking the seat off is straightforward. There's 6 bolts, and they're T40 Torx heads. There's a couple of studs which have a nut that goes on the bottom, and then there's a couple of cables to disconnect, and the seat will come off. Of course, in practice it's not that straightforward, but the first thing to do is take off all of the plastic panels, which are just held on with some Phillips screws. In order to get these 2 side panels off, you really need to get this one off, and in order to get this one off, you have to take off this black plastic piece underneath that acts as a duct for cables and air and that kind of thing. And again, they're just Phillips screws. With that ducting out of the way, there are a couple of clips here. You just get a flat blade screwdriver underneath them, lever them up slightly, and the rear panel will drop backwards, and then simply lift out. There's a couple of catches that go in these holes that secure it in place, and once that covers off and the front covers off, then the side panels, once you release the Phillips screws, they'll come off. So I said most of the screws will come out quite straightforwardly with a T40 Torx head and a ratchet driver, but there are then a couple of interesting bits. First are the studs, and these take a 13mm box spanner, so you can get under there quite easily, and that leaves the 2 at the back here, which are where the fun begins. The first is there's a bolt under there, if you can see that, which is the stop that stops the seat rotating all the way round, which would foul the wires that connect up to the seatbelt pretensioner, that kind of thing. This one's quite easy. There's that access hole, and you can get a 20mm box spanner onto it, and or a 20mm socket, and that will come off quite easily. So the really tedious one is this last one at the back here, and there's no good way that I've found that you can get at that, but you can just see it through this gap in the swivel seat base, and you can just get the hex torque into it, and then you can get a driver on that and get it most of the way out. But then I've found you have to get your fingers underneath and twizzle it out the last few inches, or last few turns. 2 final points of note. There's an earth strap here that just a black cable that runs down through the seat base, and it comes down, and certainly on ours it's trapped under here on this stud, so make a note of that, so that when you put it back, it's you can trap it again, and that, I think, just simply makes a good earth between the swivel part and the seat base. And the other point of note is there's a connector down here that you need to disconnect. Simply pulls apart, and I think that's for the seatbelt pretensioner and the switch that detects whether you've got a seatbelt plugged in or not, and so disconnect that and tuck that well out of the way so it doesn't get caught when you take the seat off. Then, with all those removed, the seat will lift out, but remember, it's quite heavy. Put something down to cover the floor. I've got a mat down there, and there we go. One down, rinse and repeat for the second of the passenger seat. with both the front seats removed, we can now have a decent look at what we're dealing with. So that's the existing lead acid leisure battery under the driver's seat with its local fuses. And over here under the passenger seat we've got the Electra block. It's an EBL 119. We've got the solar charge controller down here. That's the Victron 7510 that I put in a little while ago to replace the LR1218 that was there factory fitted. And this is the Shout, they call it the Booster. It's the WA121545, but it's basically a battery to battery charger. So great, so now I can actually get at the wiring properly. The mains wiring I'm going to have to split to drive the inverter, and nice, I can get to everything now. So well worth taking the time to take all the seats apart.